Welcome to my car review of this 2017 Ford Fiesta SE. This Ford Fiesta comes with a 1.6-liter inline-4 naturally aspirated that puts out 120 horsepower at 6,350 RPM and 112 pound-feet of torque at 5,000 RPM. The car redlines at 6,500 RPM and gets about 27 city, 35 highway, and 30 combined miles per gallon. The engine has an 11:1 compression ratio out of a 1.6 Duratec TI VCT engine that has variable valve timing. The car curb weight comes in at 2,537 pounds, and the 0 to 60 is around 9.1 seconds, with a top speed that is drag limited of 118 miles per hour. This car is a front-engine, front-wheel drive, subcompact, 5-door hatchback with a 6-speed dual-clutch automatic transmission. More on that automatic transmission later. This is the 6th-generation Ford Fiesta, though the first in the U.S. market, and this 2017 is the last year of the 6th generation. This particular model and trim is equipped with the base 1.6-liter naturally aspirated engine that puts out the least amount of power, but has the least complexity. There are two other engine options, which are very interesting and worth the money if you can afford it. The first engine is very interesting, only available on SE trims and higher on certain year models, which is the tiny 1.0-liter 3-cylinder turbo engine, which puts out 123 horsepower and 125 foot-pound of torque, or up to 148 foot-pound of torque during overboost. Peak horsepower comes in a hair earlier than the Duratec's 6,350 RPM, with the EcoBoost engine coming in at 6,000 RPM, and peak torque starts at 1,400 RPM. In addition, the 1.0 EcoBoost engine gets 32 city and 45 highway miles per gallon, and amazingly, the whole engine has about the 2D footprint about the size of a sheet of paper. Now, the other option is the well-known ST engine, which is 1.6-liter turbo that puts out 197 horsepower and 202 pound-feet of torque, with a still economical 26 city and 33 highway miles per gallon. So the car is not very powerful, and it's on the lower to middle end of cars that weigh about this much in its class. But it definitely accelerates better than the lower horsepower cars, and you can definitely feel that 15 to 20 horsepower difference compared to something like a Yaris, which has nearly 15 less horsepower. The weight is still fairly low at over 2,500 pounds, but the power-to-weight ratio seems appropriate, at least by my butt dyno. Now, the interior is pretty decent in its class, with the front seats getting the star treatment. Now, the rear of the car will leave you longing, but as with many cars in the segment, they're not used as frequently in commuter cars like this. The front of the car makes it feel so much closer to its older siblings with the Ford Sync systems and the modern-looking buttons and fonts. And as far as what I didn't particularly like, would have to include the seats at the top of the list. The top of the seats were a little too low and were bolstering the lower part of my shoulders, which I didn't particularly like, and it just felt like it was digging in a little too low. Besides that, I didn't have any issues with the rest of the interior, besides the already mentioned back seats being cramped and skimped on. As far as the suspension and handling goes, I was excited to compare the handling of this car because I've driven a lot of subcompact cars, and the Ford Fiesta was the car I almost replaced my '08 Jetta TDI with, although I ultimately went with an '08 Yaris. I was really excited to compare the handling because I've heard that the Ford Fiesta is one of the better handling cars in its class, and I do value handling very much. The Fiesta felt very composed during all my testing, including high-speed stability and sweeping turns and quick lane changes. I thought it handled very well, but I always had this nagging artificial feeling, and the electric power steering is to blame. While it definitely makes it easy to drive, it didn't provide the level of feedback that I liked, and it was very obvious that it was electric steering. As far as the power goes, I mentioned power and weight already, but just to simply put it, for normal driving, the car had very adequate power, but a touch more torque could really put this a few more rungs up the ladder. As far as overall comfort, the car was comfy enough for up to an hour-long drive, but I didn't particularly like the seats, and the cabin warmed up pretty quickly, which is nicer for colder climates. The pros. I really enjoyed this experience of the Ford Fiesta, And in the front seats, you can really get tricked into thinking this car is nicer than it is due to the modern looking front interface, dashboard, and especially the cool mood lighting feature. Most of the important features in the car, which include power, handling, fuel economy, and features, really felt above average. And my biggest like about the car is I think it's the best looking in its class. Cons, very simple. What I didn't like about the car is while much of the car is very good, nothing seemed particularly great. Okay, so onto the rating. I'm going to rate the car based on 7 categories and then give it a total score. On the category of looks, I give it a 5. I really liked the looks of this car, and while I don't know, I might be putting it a little too high, I might have to adjust it later, but I think it really looks fantastic. Okay, for acceleration, I give it a 1. A 9.10 to 60 is just going to give you a 1. Handling, I give it a 5. I was very impressed with the handling, but it just felt a little artificial for my taste, but it still handled very well. It just didn't feel that good. As far as luxury goes, I give it a 2. It's definitely better than the Hyundai Accent and the Yaris. It really kind of had that tricking moment, especially with the mood lighting, to make you feel like it's a nicer car than it is. But yeah, as soon as you get into the back seat, you forget all of that and realize and remember, yeah, it's not a luxury car. Practicality, I'll give it a 3 because it's fuel efficient and it's going to get you around. It's a great commuter car. It's a hatchback, so I'll give it a 3 in practicality. I only dock it points because it's not the most fuel efficient, although it's still very good, and it's a little bit on the smaller end, so it doesn't have that much cargo. Quality and reliability, I'll give it a 3, just because it seems very consistent in its class, but it's not the best because the dual clutch transmissions especially have had a lot of issues, and there have been lawsuits where they have been very jerky and not been fixed properly by the dealers. Even though there are service bulletins out for them, they really have just reflashed the ECUs and not really done much. And so, yeah, that reliability being an issue has to dock it points. For value, I give it a 6. At $10,000 for like a year-old car, I think it's really a great value, especially for the whole total package. For that price, $10,000 gets you a really solid, almost brand new commuter car, and not one that's a stripper model that like a Mitsubishi Mirage or something like that. And so, yeah, I'll give it a value of a 6. So the total score comes in at 25, and that's really good. It puts it a few points ahead of similar economy class cars or older cars that aren't sports cars. Now, my scoring system heavily favors sports cars because I love sports cars, so that's why I didn't score quite as well. But it's right in the middle of the pack for all the cars reviewed so far, and I think the Ford Fiesta is a really great car. Hey guys, if you liked that video, please hit the like button, comment down below, and subscribe. Please, especially that last part, subscribe it because of the recent changes that YouTube has made. I really would appreciate it if you would help me to get my goal of 1,000 subscribers. Alright guys, I'll see you next one. Peace.